I should have turned back the moment the wind whispered my name. Even now, as I write these words with hands that barely remember warmth, I can still feel that first breath of the Frostbound Peaks sliding through the seams of my coat, curling around my ribs like an icy serpent. It wasn't a simple gust or the mind playing tricks. It was a greeting, a hunger, promise. But we were eager then. 5 explorers chasing a legend, drunk off ambition and half-frozen adrenaline. I thought I was prepared. I thought cold was just a sensation, something the body adapts to if the will is strong enough. I had no concept of what cold really meant. Not until the mountain taught me. We crossed the last line of the inhabited valleys at dawn. The sky a sheet of iron gray that threatened snow but held off long enough to trick us into thinking the day would be generous. Our guide, Marin, pointed her staff toward the jagged horizon. There, she said, breath misting in front of her veil. The peaks begin where the wind forgets to stop. I laughed then. Actually laughed. I should have choked on it. We hiked upward through forests that thinned into skeletal silhouettes, every branch coated with hoarfrost like 1,000 brittle claws reaching for us. My boots crunched through a thin crust of ice. The others trailed behind me. Daver, lugging his camera equipment. Silas with his journals. Lena with her medical pack, and Marin, who walked lightly, as though the mountain had carved the path for her alone. The higher we climbed, the quieter it became. Even our breathing felt muffled, swallowed by the white air. The world seemed to pause, waiting. Then came that wind. It slithered between the trees, brushing past my ear, carrying with it a sound that, I swear, wasn't the whistle of air. It was softer, shaped, a syllable. My name. I stopped so abruptly that Daver bumped into me. What? He muttered, adjusting the strap of his bag. Did you hear that? Hear what? The wind pushed against us again, stronger this time. I locked my jaw and pretended it didn't feel like fingers grazing the back of my neck. Nothing, I lied. Let's keep moving. The trees thinned further until only snowfields and scraggly shrubs remained. The world turned white, sky, ground, horizon. An empty canvas where direction felt meaningless. But Marin walked with purpose, so we followed, trusting in her knowledge of the land. By midday, thick snow began to fall, slow and heavy flakes that clung to our eyelashes. The temperature plummeted. I pulled my scarf higher, sucking in a breath that burned my lungs. You say the peaks are in eternal winter, Silas said, falling into step beside Marin. But how eternal? Years? Centuries? Marin didn't answer at first. Then she spoke quietly, as if the snow might overhear. The peaks have never known a thaw. Not in recorded history. Not in the stories of my grandmother's grandmother. That's impossible, Lena said. Climate doesn't work like that. Climate. Marin's voice grew distant. This place is not governed by climate. I didn't like the way she said that. The way her eyes flicked upward to the swirling white sky as though something watched from within it. By the time we reached the first ridge, I felt the cold in my bones. It wasn't just external, it was creeping inward, settling in the marrow. I rubbed my arms hard and tried not to think about Marin's words. Eternal winter, place not governed by climate. It sounded like mythology, but the mountain didn't feel like mythology. It felt alive. We pitched camp in the shelter of a jutting rock formation, though the wind still clawed at us like something enraged. The tent stakes had to be hammered deep into the frozen ground, and even then the fabric shook violently, snapping like a trapped animal. We huddled around a portable heater inside the largest tent. The orange glow cast jittery shadows across everyone's faces. Daver held his hands so close to the heat that I worried the skin would blister. This cold is unnatural, he muttered. Feels like it's coming from inside the ground. Or above, Lena said, glancing upward nervously. Silas scribbled something in his notebook, murmuring as he wrote. Local folklore says the mountain is haunted. Marin's head snapped up. Not haunted. Then what? Silas asked. She hesitated. Possessed. We all looked at her. By what? I asked. Her voice dropped to a hush. The wind. Silas snorted. The wind isn't alive. Marin didn't laugh. Here, it is. Davor looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should save the ghost stories for later. They are not stories, Marin whispered. The people who once lived near these mountains spoke of the whispering gale. Presence. A hunger in the cold. Those who ventured too far never returned. Their bodies never found. Only their warmth gone. I felt a prick along my spine. So you believe the wind steals it? It takes what it needs to live. Silas closed his journal with a soft snap. Winds don't. Live. Not the winds you know. The heater sputtered. Dimmed. Fought against an invisible force. I swore I saw the shadows quiver. Davor exhaled shakily. We're all just cold and tired. That's all. We tried to sleep after that, but rest came in shallow fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of white shapes drifting around me. Faces buried in snow, their mouths open as though trying to speak. I felt the cold on my skin in those dreams, seeping into my heartbeat. At some point in the night, I woke to silence. Absolute silence. No wind. No creaking tent. No breathing from the others. I sat up. The air felt thick, heavy, suffocating in its stillness. And then, faintly, I heard a whispering outside. Not words. Not exactly. More like the suggestion of words through teeth made of ice. I crawled toward the tent flap, my fingers trembling despite the layers of gloves. Don't. Marin's voice rose softly behind me. I froze. Did you hear it? Yes. What is it? The mountain. Her tone carried a weight I didn't understand. It knows we are here. I wanted to ask what that meant, but before I could, the wind returned. Not as a gust, as a scream. The tent bowed inward sharply, fabric stretching tight as if pressed by thousands of invisible hands. The heater flickered violently, then died with a soft hiss. Lena jolted awake with a gasp. Davor cursed under his breath. Silas scrambled for his flashlight. The temperature dropped so fast the air crystallized. And then, right through the walls of the tent, we heard footsteps. Slow, crunching footsteps in the snow. I gripped my pack and rummaged blindly for my knife, though I knew steel meant nothing against the cold outside. Marin reached for her staff. Do not leave this tent, she said urgently. No matter what you hear. The footsteps paused. A shadow fell across the fabric. Tall, narrow, as if the wind itself had grown a spine and stood to watch us. Silas whispered, Is someone out there? I shook my head hard. It can't be. Then a voice, fragile, stretched, quivering, slipped in through the seams of the tent. Help. Please, help me. My blood froze, because that voice was familiar. It was mine. Lena grabbed my arm. Don't move. But I couldn't breathe. Couldn't look away from the silhouette outside the tent, its edges shimmering like blowing snow. How did it have my voice? Help me. The shape leaned closer. My heart hammered against my ribs. Marin thrust her staff against the tent wall, striking the shadow with a force that made the fabric ripple. Begone, she hissed. Your hunger will not be fed here. The shadow recoiled, then dissolved, literally dissolved, into a drift of swirling ice that whipped away on an unseen current. The wind roared again, furious this time. The entire tent shook, and I half expected it to tear free of the ground and vanish. But slowly, gradually, the storm calmed. The wind ebbed. The cold retreated to its usual murderous stillness. Only then did I realize I was shaking violently. Marin lowered her staff, breathing hard. We were warned, she said. Now it knows our warmth. It will follow us. What the hell was that? Davor whispered. Marin looked at me. Her eyes held pity. The Frostbound Peaks, she said, have taken interest in you. My stomach clenched. Why me? Because you heard it first. The night dragged on without further incident, but none of us slept. The heater remained dead, and the cold clung to us with claws we couldn't shake. I kept touching my face, my arms, my chest, making sure I was still whole, still warm, still me. And all the while the mountain watched. We left camp at first light. None of us spoke much. Even Silas, who usually filled silence with endless theories, seemed subdued. The storm had churned up several feet of fresh snow, forcing us to wade through drifts that swallowed our legs. The wind had calmed, but not entirely. It circled us like a curious predator. Every now and then, it brushed the back of my neck, soft, almost affectionate. And sometimes, I thought I heard it whisper something. Not my name this time. Promise. Soon. As we climbed higher, the air tasted sharper, like metal. The sky darkened, though the sun had barely risen. How much farther? Lena asked, her voice shaking. Marin didn't answer immediately. Then she pointed toward the tallest peak, its summit hidden in spiraling clouds. There, she said, beyond the ridge, but the worst is still ahead. That was only its greeting. If that was a greeting, Daver muttered. I don't want to know what a warning feels like. I didn't say anything, because I already felt the warning. It thrummed beneath my skin, in the rhythm of my pulse. The cold no longer just surrounded me. It pressed inward, probing, searching for openings. I had the unnerving sensation that something was waiting for me, expecting me, claiming me, and for the first time, I wondered whether any of us would leave these mountains alive. The wind picked up again as we crested the ridge. Unlike before, it didn't howl. It whispered. It slithered around our ankles, tugging at scarves and coats, pressing against exposed skin, testing us. It had a rhythm now, deliberate and patient. I realized I could feel it inside me, a creeping chill that seemed to move independently of the outside air. I shivered, but the chill wasn't only on my skin. It was in my blood, crawling along my veins like ice spiders. Marin moved ahead, silent and sure, but I noticed her hands were never far from the staff. It glinted faintly in the dim light, tipped with frost that refused to melt. She glanced back occasionally, her eyes sharp, almost pleading. You all feel it, she said quietly. The frost, it isn't dead. Not here. It watches. It learns. I clenched my jaw, forcing my teeth together. Watches what? Everything, she said. And it knows fear. Fear. That was the word that made my chest tighten. Not danger, not cold, not hunger. Fear. It wasn't just the cold. It was our fear that fed the peaks. Every shiver, every whispered doubt, every flinch at a shadow in the snow. The frost could taste it, and it would follow us, anticipate our weakness. We pressed on, trudging through waist-deep drifts. Every step felt like dragging my body through syrup made of ice. Lena's fingers were ghost-white around her poles. Daver's breath came out in ragged, frost-laced clouds. Silas muttered under his breath, scribbling lines of frantic notes in his journal. His ink frozen in spots as it touched the paper. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time here was meaningless. The world was white and gray and cold, a place without measure, without mercy. The wind teased us intermittently, brushing against our faces, slipping between layers of clothing, but never fully striking. It was deliberate, like it was teaching us patience before the real hunt began. The first sign of danger appeared as shadows in the snow. I caught them from the corner of my eye, dark patches that shifted unnaturally against the white. Lena saw them too. She froze mid-step, her mouth opening in a silent scream that the wind swallowed before it could escape. Shadows, I breathed. What? They aren't shadows, Marin said. Not in the way we understand them. The frost takes form. It mimics life. I blinked, thinking I must be imagining it. But then one of the shadows moved in a way snow never should, elongating, stretching, twisting into something vaguely human. And I saw, for the first time, the faces. Faces frozen mid-scream, their mouths open in silent terror, eyes wide and hollow. They weren't people. They were ice. Yet somehow they were alive. One reached toward us with a crystalline hand, its fingers jagged and glinting in the dull light. I stumbled backward, catching myself on a drift. The wind hissed. That sound, that unnatural hiss, carried a voice. My own voice, calling, pleading, screaming. Stop! I shouted, though I knew it would not obey. The shadow recoiled for a moment, but then it multiplied. Where one form had been, three now shifted in the snow. They were testing us, learning, circling, probing. Daver raised his camera, snapping photos, but the lens fogged instantly, the images distorted beyond recognition. Twisted forms staring back at him as though mocking him. "Keep moving," Marin shouted. "Don't stop." But it wasn't just the shadows. The snow beneath our boots began to harden, forming spikes and ridges that tried to impale, trip, or entangle us. It rose like slow fingers from the ground, seeking to hold us in place. Every step forward required brute force, every stride a battle with the frozen earth itself. Silas cried out as a spike pierced his boot, embedding itself in the sole. "Help me!" I yanked at his foot, Lena pushing from behind, while Marin slammed her staff into the snow. The frost shivered under her strike, then withdrew just enough for Silas to pull free. The wind howled then, a crescendo that seemed to rise from the mountains themselves. And from the white nothingness above, the voice came again. My voice, Silas's, Lena's, Daver's, Marin's, all of us, screaming in fear, echoing through the peaks in a distorted chorus. "We have to make it to the pass," Marin screamed, her staff glowing faintly now, frost melting in her wake. "It cannot catch warmth in the pass, it is too narrow, too confined." I didn't ask why. I only ran, the snow tearing at my legs, the wind clawing at my back, my own voice screaming in my ears. The shadows multiplied endlessly, filling every blank space. They brushed against my coat, my face, my hands, stealing warmth I hadn't realized I'd had to give. I could feel it leaving me hollow and raw, a shivering husk of myself. Somewhere in the distance, a scream rose above the rest. Daver. I wanted to turn, to help him, but Marin's grip on my arm was iron, dragging me forward, insisting we reach the pass. And so we ran, my boots breaking through the crusty snow, the shadows, crawling after us like living smoke. By the time we reached the narrow pass, I could barely think. My hands were numb, my face cracked from the cold, my breath shallow and ragged. The wind slowed as we entered the constriction. Marin planted her staff in the snow and raised her arms, chanting softly. The shadows recoiled at the edges of the pass, hissing like broken glass. I realized then that the wind obeyed her, or at least feared her. For now, we collapsed in a heap, every one of us trembling violently. Lena's hands were shaking so hard she couldn't even hold her poles. Silas lay face down, gasping, his notebook frozen solid. Daver sat with his head in his hands, moaning softly. Marin knelt beside me. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. "You've been touched," she said. Her fingers brushed my cheek. "It knows your warmth. It will follow you." "What do you mean, follow me?" I whispered, horror tightening in my chest. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, her expression grave. Then she pushed herself to her feet. "We cannot linger," she said. "The pass is our only chance. Beyond it, there is nothing but the Frostbound Peaks themselves." I nodded numbly. My body shook so violently I could barely move. Every nerve was alive with terror, every inch of my skin burning under the invisible frost that clung to me. We climbed the narrow path of the pass slowly, each step deliberate. The wind had quieted but still lingered, teasing, circling, whispering. I heard my voice in it again, soft and pleading. It made me want to collapse, to scream, to give up. But we couldn't. We couldn't stop. At some point, the pass widened slightly, opening onto a plateau carved from sheer ice. The clouds above swirled in strange patterns, almost as if they were watching us, forming and reforming into shapes. I saw figures, humans, animals, and forms that defied comprehension, moving within the storm. They were shadows of snow, frozen echoes of life. And then I saw it, a figure impossibly tall, its body composed entirely of frost and jagged ice, standing at the center of the plateau. Its head tilted slowly, as though studying us. I realized with a shock that it was listening, feeling our fear, our warmth, our pulse. And it waited. Marin whispered, "This is it, the heart of the peaks. Stay close. Do not show weakness." We approached, careful, dragging ourselves forward. The air itself seemed heavier here, denser, filled with the static hum of living cold. Each step was an agony, every breath a labor. My fingers had gone pale, the skin cracking from exposure. My lips bled where they split. And yet, the presence in the center of the plateau never moved. It simply waited. Then the snow shifted around it, forming a throne or something like one. Frost creaked as if the mountain itself had made a seat. And from it, a voice came. Not a whisper, not a scream, but words. My voice, entirely mine, calling my name in a cadence that made my stomach twist. I stumbled backward. It's speaking. "Yes," Marin said, her voice a tight thread of calm. "It learned your warmth. It will try to consume it. We must offer it something. It feeds on life, but it obeys rules." "Rules?" I gasped. "Rules," she repeated. "It cannot take what is willingly offered." I looked at her, terror-stricken. My body wanted to run, to collapse, to melt into snow and never rise. And then I realized the truth. The Frostbound Peaks didn't hunt randomly. They tested. They demanded submission, acknowledgement. They consumed warmth, but only that which fought against their will. I swallowed hard. I stepped forward. My hands shook violently. The wind circled me, tugging at my scarf, my coat, my very skin, but I forced myself to meet the figure's gaze. "I offer myself," I said, voice cracking yet steady. "Take what you will." The figure tilted its head. The air around me hummed. My bones ached with cold. My blood seemed frozen in place. And yet, it paused. The wind stilled. The snow froze midair. And for the first time since the peaks claimed me, I felt nothing. Marin touched my shoulder. "It accepts the offering," she whispered, "but only because you chose. Never forget that. It is alive, yes, but it respects choice." The shadow figure dissolved into mist. The wind stilled completely. The plateau was silent. For a long moment, we simply stood, shivering and broken, staring at where it had been. Then Marin said, "We move. Now, the peaks are not done testing you." And so we pressed on, each step heavier than the last, knowing the mountain had marked me, marked us, and that the living frost would never truly release its hunger. The wind had quieted, but I didn't feel safe. The stillness that followed was more suffocating than the howl of the storm, more unnerving than the shadows that had twisted before us. I could almost taste the silence, like it was a layer of frost coating my throat, numbing my senses. The peaks, it seemed, were content for now. We moved on, our footsteps, heavy in the snow, the weight of the mountain pressing down on us. The wind no longer whipped at our backs, but it lingered, ghosting just beyond our awareness, curling in the corners of my vision. I kept feeling it there, like a hand brushing the base of my spine, just out of reach. The frost was alive. I knew it now, fully, with every fiber of my being. Silas kept close, his eyes darting to the horizon, his hands shaking uncontrollably, despite his attempts to mask it. Lena walked beside him, her face pale, lips cracked, but her eyes were dead. Not from cold, not from exhaustion, but something deeper. Something that came from the shadows we'd seen on the plateau. She didn't speak, didn't meet anyone's gaze. Daver had taken the lead, moving with a strange, mechanical precision. His camera was strapped to his chest, but he hadn't raised it in hours. His gaze never lingered on anything, as if he was afraid to acknowledge the world around him. Every so often, he glanced over his shoulder, but I don't think he was looking for any of us. He was looking for something else, something behind him. We walked like that for hours, the world around us growing dimmer, colder. The horizon had vanished, swallowed by the thickening cloud of frost. It was as if the peaks were erasing everything: time, space, purpose. It was only us, and the frost, and the hunger that came from the mountains themselves. At one point we stopped, if only to rest or perhaps to give ourselves the illusion that we could still breathe. My legs trembled beneath me. the cold gnawing at the marrow of my bones. The air felt thick, oppressive, and every breath was like inhaling ice. I could see the vapor of our breath hanging in the air like ghosts. "We need to make camp," Marin said, though her voice was thin, as if it too had been drained of warmth. "No," I said quickly before I could stop myself. "We need to keep moving. We can't stop. It knows we're here." Marin looked at me, her eyes tired, but there was something else there, something resigned. "It always knows," she said softly. "But you're right. We can't stay in one place too long. The longer we linger, the harder it becomes to leave." I swallowed hard. I hadn't considered that. The peaks didn't just test your physical limits. They wore you down, slowly, until your mind and body shattered in tandem. There was no escape from it, no safe place, but we had no choice. So we moved again. It was Daver who saw it first. We were trudging through a particularly deep snowdrift when he stopped, his breath hitching in his throat. His eyes were wide, fixed on something ahead. He dropped his camera, the strap catching his arm, but he barely noticed. I turned to see what had caught his attention, and I felt my blood freeze. A figure stood at the edge of the snowfield. At first, it looked like a man, a tall, gaunt figure cloaked in white. His outline was blurred by the swirling snow, but I could see enough to know that he wasn't part of the landscape. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted slightly toward us, as if waiting. The faintest shimmer of light glinted off something in his hand. I couldn't see it clearly, but it was enough to make my pulse quicken. "Who is that?" Lena whispered, her voice hoarse, raw. Marin's hand was on her staff, her grip tight. "It is not a person. Do not speak to it." But Daver's feet were already moving. He didn't listen. Of course, he didn't. He was too caught up in the madness of it all. The mountain had gotten to him already. He took a step forward. Then another.
"Dave, no."
Silas shouted, but it was too late. The figure in the snow shifted, its body elongating unnaturally, stretching like a shadow caught in the light. It moved closer, faster than I thought possible for something buried beneath that much frost. The light from its hand flickered, revealing it to be a blade, an ice dagger, jagged and gleaming.
"No."
Marin cried, raising her staff, but it was too slow. Daver didn't even have time to scream. The figure lunged, its frozen hand reaching out to catch him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. The dagger glinted in the air, arcing downward. And then, a snap. Daver's body went limp. His eyes were wide open, frozen in terror, but he didn't make a sound. He was dead before he hit the ground. Silence fell. I stood there, rooted in place, unable to move, unable to breathe. The figure's gaze, cold, empty, hungry, met mine. Couldn't look away. Something in its eyes, something I couldn't name, spoke to me, told me I was next, that we were all next. But it wasn't done yet. It turned, its silhouette vanishing into the storm, as quickly as it had come. "Daver?" Lena whispered, falling to her knees beside his body. But even she didn't move to touch him. There was no point. He was already gone. "Get up," Marin said, her voice sharp, commanding. "We can't stay here." I didn't argue. There was no point. We moved again in a daze, dragging our feet through the snow. I kept my gaze fixed on the ground, avoiding the emptiness in Daver's place. The loss was sharp, but there was no time to grieve. The peaks would take what they wanted. They always did. As we neared a narrow valley, the temperature dropped further. The wind returned, but it wasn't the same wind we had fought before. It was colder, more insidious, like it was seeping through our very souls. The frost was everywhere, whispering, shifting, alive. And then I felt it, the shift in the air, the sudden tension that settled in my chest, the heavy, oppressive weight of something watching, something waiting. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was close. Lena was the first to react. She froze, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice trembling. I strained my ears. The wind wasn't just wind anymore. It was a voice, not a whisper, not a scream, but words, soft but urgent. Help me. I staggered back. The voice was familiar, too familiar. I looked around, but there was no one, just snow and ice, and the shadow of the mountain pressing down on us. Lena's face had gone pale, her breath coming in short gasps. She shook her head, as though trying to clear something from her mind. No, she muttered. No, it can't be. But I knew what it was. The mountain wasn't just taking us. It was feeding. It was feeding on us, on our warmth, on our terror. It was devouring our souls one piece at a time. And then it came for me. A figure materialized from the mist, emerging from the shadows of the valley. It was tall, thin, its body covered in ice, its face obscured by a mask of frost. But I knew it was the same thing that had killed Daver, the same thing that had whispered my name. The voice grew louder in my head. Help me. I stumbled back, my body trembling, my legs failing beneath me. Marin grabbed my arm, pulling me toward her. Move, she said urgently. Move. I tried to run, but the ice was everywhere. It was in my chest, my throat, my lungs, freezing me from the inside out. The figure advanced, its movements slow but deliberate. Every step it took, the air grew colder. My bones creaked, my skin burned with cold. I looked at Lena, at Silas, but they were already lost. Their eyes glazed over, their bodies frozen in place. It was me now, me alone. I ran. But I knew, even as my legs carried me away, that I wasn't running from it. I was running toward it, toward the end, because the frost had chosen me. I ran, but the snow didn't give. It was as if the earth itself had become a part of the mountain, a living entity that dragged me back with every step I took. The ground was sticky with cold, the air thick with the weight of the peaks. The shadows followed me, shifting in the corners of my vision, pulling me toward something darker, something worse than the death we'd already witnessed. But it wasn't just the shadows. It was the silence that stretched and stretched until it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. No wind, no sound, not even the crunch of snow beneath my feet. Just the faint hum of the frost, like it was alive, like it was listening. My heart hammered in my chest, but I couldn't stop, couldn't turn back. I had to keep moving. I had to keep running. But with every step, I felt it. The pull, the hunger, the way the cold seemed to wrap tighter around me, like hands tightening around my throat. The mountain wasn't just after me. It was inside me. It was devouring me from the inside out. I stumbled. My knees buckled beneath me, and I hit the ground with a thud, gasping for air. The cold and the snow seemed to rise up, pressing into my skin, numbing my hands, my feet, my legs. I clawed at the snow, trying to push myself back to my feet, but the weight of it was too much. The frost was sinking in, rooting me to the earth, pulling me deeper into the heart of the peaks. Help me. The voice, my voice, it echoed in my mind, seeping into my thoughts, wrapping around me like a shroud. I tried to scream, but the cold cut off the sound before it could escape. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The frost had already taken so much from me. I was no longer running from the shadows. I was running toward them, but I couldn't stop. My legs were moving on their own, dragging me through the snow, through the ice. The figure was there, waiting. The mask of frost gleamed in the dim light, its eyes hollow, its body towering, a thing of nightmares and snow. It stood at the edge of the valley, watching me approach with an eerie patience. I should have turned. I should have run the other way, but I couldn't. The frost had its claws in me now, and I was too far gone to escape. I could feel it deep in my bones. It was never just about survival. It was about submission. The figure's hand rose, the jagged ice dagger gleaming in its grip. I could see the blade now, sharp as a shard of glass, reflecting the dim light in the valley. It didn't need to move. It didn't need to chase me. I was already lost. My legs gave way again. I collapsed into the snow, my breath ragged and shallow. I stared at the figure, waiting for the final blow. But it didn't come. Not yet. The figure tilted its head, as though studying me, its hollow eyes never leaving mine. The wind started again, but it wasn't the same wind. It wasn't the icy gusts that had chased us earlier. It was warm, strange. The warmth of it almost made me feel like I was suffocating. The frost around me seemed to pulse. The snow began to swirl, rising up from the ground, like it was alive. The mountain was alive. It was breathing, exhaling its cold breath onto me. But there was something else now. A strange, heavy presence that pressed down on my chest, forcing me to stay still, to submit. The voice again, softer this time, but still mine. Help me. I was too cold to respond, too far gone. The snow wrapped around me like a blanket, suffocating and thick. My limbs were stiffening, turning to ice, my blood slowing, my heart thumping against my ribs. I couldn't remember if I'd been running for minutes or hours, but none of it mattered now. I had reached the heart of the mountain. The figure stepped forward. I could see it clearly now. Its face, if you could call it that, was a mask of frost, cracked and jagged like the remnants of a glacier. Its eyes were holes, empty, soulless, but staring into mine as if it were reading something inside me, something I couldn't see. And then, just as the blade raised to strike, I heard a sound, a scream. Not my voice this time. It was Lena's. Her voice, shrill and desperate, tearing through the frost, the storm, the mountain itself. And then it was followed by Silas's and then Davers. Their screams echoed through the valley like a chorus of the damned. The mountain reacted. The shadows flared up again, shifting in the snow, crawling across the ground like sentient things, like the very land itself had decided to reclaim us. The frost flickered with light, the storm above us screaming in fury. Run! Marin's voice broke through the chaos. It was sharp, commanding. Run! I didn't question it. I didn't ask how she had found me. I didn't care. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The figure was gone. The shadows, the cold, the frost. They were all behind me now, but I could feel them. I could feel them chasing me. Marin was ahead of me, her staff glowing with a faint blue light. The light cut through the snow, cutting a path in the frozen wilderness. She was the only thing that was real now, the only warmth, the only hope. I pushed forward, dragging my feet through the deep snow, my body on the edge of collapse. The warmth of Marin's staff was like fire against the ice. I could feel the heat seeping through my skin, fighting the cold that had already taken so much. But the frost was relentless. It pressed in from all sides, crawling through the cracks in my thoughts, through the gaps in my skin, sinking deeper with every breath I took. The mountain was alive. The frost was alive. It was a part of me now. The ground beneath us began to shake. The peak of the mountain trembled as if it were waking, stretching after a long, cold slumber. The snow began to rise around us, swirling, whipping into a frenzy, as if the mountain itself had decided that it wouldn't let us leave. The wind howled, and this time it wasn't just wind. It was the voice of the mountain, angry, hungry, demanding. Marin glanced over her shoulder, her face grim. "It knows," she said, her voice tight with fear. "It knows we're close." I could feel it too. The earth beneath me was shaking, cracking, splintering. The ice was giving way, the mountain itself fracturing under the pressure. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Something ancient, something terrible, stirring beneath the surface. "Don't stop," Marin shouted. "Keep moving." But the mountain was already pulling us in, dragging us deeper, wrapping us in its icy embrace. I looked back, just once, and saw the shadows rising from the snow, blotting out the world, swallowing us whole. The figure appeared again, standing at the edge of the storm, waiting for me. Its hand reached out, not with a blade, but with something much worse. Its hunger. And I knew then, the Frostbound Peaks didn't just want our warmth. They wanted our souls. The wind howled in my ears, biting at my face, but it wasn't just the cold that took my breath away. It was the darkness in the air, the weight of the peaks pressing down on us, suffocating us slowly, piece by piece. The figure in the distance wasn't moving. Not yet, but I knew it was waiting. Watching. It wanted something from me. From all of us. Marin! I gasped, my voice barely audible over the storm. We can't outrun it. We can't. Keep moving, she snapped, her voice sharp, cutting through the wind. Her staff flared with a sudden burst of light, pushing back against the shadows that crept in around us. But even that light seemed feeble. Against the vastness of the storm, the endless cold that bled into the very air we breathed. I wanted to scream, to collapse, but my legs kept moving. My mind kept screaming at me to stop, to give in, to let the cold take me like it had taken Daver, like it had taken all those before us. But I couldn't. Not yet. The ground rumbled beneath us, and I felt the sharp, sudden crack of ice beneath my feet. A deep fissure opened in the earth, the ice cracking and splintering as if the mountain itself was splitting open. I stumbled, falling to one knee, and just for a moment, I thought I heard a voice. Not mine. Help me. It was faint, distant, but it sent a chill deeper than the cold into my spine. I shook my head, pushing the thought away, but it lingered, like a shadow creeping behind me, refusing to be forgotten. Marin's voice broke through my thoughts. Get up. It's too close. We have to go. I forced myself to my feet, my breath ragged in my chest, my heart pounding. There was no time. The mountain wasn't just testing us anymore. It was hunting us. Each crack in the ice, each gust of wind, each whisper of frost. It was a step closer to our end. I looked over my shoulder. The figure stood motionless, its mask of ice gleaming in the dim light. It wasn't chasing us. It didn't need to. The storm itself was the predator, the figure only the herald. The wind picked up again, and this time it wasn't just cold. It was pain. The wind cut like 1,000 knives, tearing through my clothes, searing into my skin, gnawing at my muscles. Every step felt heavier than the last, every breath harder to take. We're not going to make it, Silas gasped, his face pale, his hands trembling. He was lagging behind, too weak to keep up. We can't. It's already too late.
Silas, no.
Lena cried, her voice thick with panic. She reached out for him, but he pulled away, shaking his head. It's over, he muttered. I can feel it. It's here. I turned my head just in time to see him collapse into the snow, his body going rigid, his breath shallow. I knew what was happening, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The cold was consuming him. His eyes were wide, staring at nothing, frozen in place. His skin was turning a sickly shade of blue, his lips cracked and pale. The frost had already begun to take hold. Silas! Lena screamed, but it was too late. I didn't know how long we stood there, staring at his frozen body. Could have been seconds. Could have been hours. All I knew was that the mountain had claimed another. It always claimed what it wanted. It always took. I forced myself to turn away, to stop looking. There was no time for grief, no time for hesitation. The mountain wouldn't wait. It would never stop. We had to keep moving. Marin, what do we do? I asked, my voice hoarse. Marin didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the path ahead, her staff glowing faintly, but even the light seemed like it was waning. She shook her head, her eyes haunted. There's no more time, she said quietly. The pass, it's the only chance. If we don't make it there, we're all lost. I nodded numbly. The pass. It had been our goal all along. The place where the frost couldn't reach us, where the mountain's grip couldn't pull us under. But now, it felt like nothing more than a distant hope, a fading dream in the face of the storm. We need to move faster, Marin urged, her voice low and urgent. I didn't need her to tell me. I was already running. But the snow was deeper now, more treacherous, and every step was a battle. The mountain wasn't just freezing us. It was pulling us into itself, dragging us down into the earth, into the heart of the ice. My breath was coming faster now, harder. My limbs were heavy, stiff with cold, my vision narrowing. Every breath was a struggle, each inhale like swallowing shards of glass. The The frost was in my lungs, in my veins, twisting its way into my very soul. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. The shadows in the distance grew closer, thicker, swirling around us like a storm of death. I could feel them watching, listening, circling. We were running straight into the heart of it. And then, ahead of us, the pass appeared. A narrow slit in the mountainside, carved into the frozen stone like a wound in the earth. It was barely visible through the snow, but it was there. Marin broke into a run, her pace swift and sure, as though the pass were the only thing keeping her alive. She had no fear left in her eyes, only the relentless drive to survive. But even as we neared the pass, I could feel the change in the air. The frost was thickening, turning to ice. The winds were no longer winds. They were claws, raking at the earth, tearing at our skin. The shadows were closing in. We had only a few more steps to go. And then, without warning, the earth trembled beneath us. The ice cracked and groaned, splitting open with a sound like thunder, and the pass, our salvation, collapsed. The ground shifted, breaking apart under our feet, and a deep chasm opened wide, swallowing the snow, the ice, and all hope.
No.
Marin screamed, her staff flashing in the air as she raised it to create a barrier. But it was too late. The ground was gone. I felt myself falling, my body plummeting through the air, the wind howling in my ears. My vision spun, the storm around me growing louder and louder until it was all I could hear, all I could feel. The cold had reached my core, and I was nothing more than a vessel of ice, falling into the abyss. Then, with a jolt, everything stopped. I landed with a sickening thud, my body hitting the snow and ice below. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just lay there, unable to summon the strength to even twitch my fingers. The frost had already sunk into my bones. I could feel it in my chest, my throat, spreading its fingers through my lungs. Help me. The voice, not mine. I knew now. It wasn't just the mountain that was alive. It wasn't just the frost. It was everything. The peaks, the storm, the shadows. Every inch of it was a part of the same hunger, the same call. It had been calling us all along. I tried to speak, tried to scream, but my throat was frozen shut. The cold was everywhere. It was in me now. I couldn't move. I couldn't escape. The mountain was all that was left. The mountain had taken everything. And now it was coming for me, for us. The frost pressed against my skin like 1,000 icy fingers, each one digging deeper, stealing my warmth, my thoughts, my very soul. The wind had stopped, but it felt as though the air itself was frozen in time. Every breath I tried to take turned to ice in my lungs, freezing my chest, choking me with every inhale. The cold had claimed me, and there was nothing left but the silence. For a long time I couldn't move. I couldn't feel anything beyond the cold, beyond the numbness that had overtaken my body. I couldn't hear the others, couldn't see anything but the endless white snow and the darkness creeping at the edges of my vision. My mind was a void, empty, frozen in place. Then I felt it again. The voice. Help me. It was faint, distant, like the echo of a whisper that was both inside and outside of me. A cry for help, but not my own. The voice of the mountain, the voice of the frost. It had been there all along, buried beneath the surface, twisting and turning in the shadows. I tried to move again, to stand, but my limbs were heavy, frozen solid. Every muscle screamed in protest, but the frost held me in place, locking me to the ice beneath me. I couldn't escape, couldn't run. I was trapped in the heart of the mountain, consumed by its hunger. Then, through the mist and the snow, I saw a shape, a shadow moving against the backdrop of the storm. Marin. She was stumbling toward me, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She was dragging herself through the snow, her staff glowing faintly, but it didn't seem to be enough. The mountain was closing in on us. I could see it in the way the wind shifted, in the way the shadows moved. The frost was alive. The peaks were alive. Marin! I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the cold, swallowed by the snow. She didn't hear me. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, her body swaying as though she were struggling to stay upright, struggling to fight against the very mountain that had claimed us. I tried to call out again, but no sound came. The cold had stolen everything. My voice, my strength, my will to survive. The frost was all that was left. Maren reached me, her hand trembling as she grasped my arm, pulling me toward her, trying to drag me to safety. But there was no safety. Not anymore. "We have to go," she gasped, her breath shallow, her words ragged. "We have to get out of here. Before it what? Before it took us completely? Before the mountain consumed us all?" But I didn't have the strength to ask. I couldn't even speak. The snow around us shifted. The ground trembled beneath us again, and I heard it. The cracking sound. The sound of ice breaking. "It's coming." The shadows swirled around us, closing in. The figure was there again, standing in the distance, its mask of frost gleaming in the dim light. It was waiting, watching, judging. Maren's grip tightened on my arm, her voice trembling as she muttered something I couldn't understand. I could see the desperation in her eyes. She knew. She knew what was coming. And then it happened. The earth split open beneath us. The ice shattered, sending us tumbling into the abyss below. I felt my body drop, falling through the cold, through the darkness, the snow and ice swirling around me like a whirlwind. My vision blurred. The world spun out of control. The mountain was consuming us. The peaks had won. I landed hard on the ice, the impact sending shockwaves through my body. Pain exploded in my chest, but it was swallowed by the cold. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to fight, to break free from the grip of the mountain. But the frost was everywhere. The shadows were everywhere. There was no escape. Maren landed beside me, her body crumpled in the snow. She didn't move. Her staff had fallen, lying just out of reach. I tried to reach for her, to pull her to safety, but my hands were frozen. I couldn't feel them anymore. My fingers were numb, stiff. The frost was crawling up my arms, twisting into my veins. I closed my eyes, but even in the darkness, I could still hear the voice. "Help me." It was louder now, more insistent. It was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop the mountain. The frost had already taken us, and now it was coming for our souls. The shadows circled around us, their icy fingers reaching for us, pulling us deeper into the abyss. The frost was everywhere. It was us. I tried to reach out again, but my strength was gone. My body had already been claimed by the cold. My heart, my mind, everything was turning to ice. I could feel it. The frost was inside me now, eating me from the inside out. And then, in the silence that followed, I heard it. The voice. "Help me." It was different this time. It was not mine. It was not Maren's. It was something else. Something older. Something ancient. I opened my eyes again, struggling to focus, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. The figure in the snow. It was not just one figure now. There were dozens, hundreds, faces made of ice, bodies formed from frost, moving in the storm, swirling around us like a gathering of spirits. They were the lost ones, the ones who had come before us, the ones who had fallen into the mountain and had never returned. And now they were coming for us. I could feel their cold fingers on my skin, their frozen breath against my face. They were pulling us down, down into the depths of the mountain, into the heart of the frost. "Help me." The voices were louder now, echoing through my mind, through the storm. The mountain was alive. It was hungry. It was calling for us, for all of us. It wanted our warmth, our life, our souls. And then I realized, it wasn't just the frost. It wasn't just the mountain. It was us, all of us. We were the offering. I tried to scream, to fight, but the frost was too strong. It was everywhere. It was in me. It was in Maren. It was in the snow, the ice, the wind. We were all part of it now. And then, in the final moment, I understood. The mountain didn't just consume us. It didn't just take our warmth. Took everything. Took us. The world faded. The frost was all that remained. The peaks, the shadows, the cold, they had won. And we were gone. The darkness was absolute. At first, I thought I had lost consciousness, but then I realized there was no longer a I. There was only the cold, and the endless stretching silence that swallowed all things, devouring even the echo of thought. I could no longer feel my body. It wasn't that it had gone numb. It was that it had simply ceased to exist. My limbs, my chest, my mind, everything had become one with the frost, one with the vast, empty void that stretched into infinity. There was no up or down, no right or left. There was only the cold, so deep, so consuming, that it eradicated the very concept of space and time. I was no longer alive. I had become the mountain. Help me. The voice. It was still there, louder now, but not mine. Not Marin's. It was something deeper, something older. The voice was the mountain. The voice was the frost. And it echoed through the endless void, calling to me, calling to all of us. A scream that had no end. It wasn't a plea. Not anymore. It was a command. I tried to move, but there was nothing left to move. There was no body, no will to fight. There was only the cold, the endless frost, and the whispers that filled the silence, pulling me deeper into the heart of the peaks. And then the images came, flickering, faint. At first, they were nothing more than shadows, moving against the pale backdrop of ice. But then, as my awareness started to take shape again, I could see them more clearly. Faces, their eyes wide, their bodies frozen in eternal terror. They weren't just the dead from our expedition, no. They were the ones who had come before us, the ones who had fallen victim to the mountain long before we had ever arrived. The faces were everywhere. The figures were swirling around me like ghosts made of ice, their limbs stiff and their mouths frozen in screams. They were the lost ones, the ones who had answered the mountain's call just like we had. And now we were among them. I tried to scream again, but no sound came. There was no breath, no voice, only the frost. The faces moved around me, swirling like a storm, each one unique, yet all identical in their terror. Their eyes locked onto me, and I could feel the weight of their gaze, as if they were calling to me, beckoning me to join them in the eternal sleep of the mountain. They had been consumed by the frost just as we had been, just as I was, and I understood finally the truth. The peaks weren't a place of isolation. They weren't just a mountain range. They were a trap, a living, breathing organism. The wind wasn't a natural force. It was a predator, a force of nature that had learned to hunt, to seek out warmth and life, and to feed on it. The frost was its hunger, its thirst. The mountain had fed on us, just as it had fed on all the others who had ventured too close. We were not the first, and we would not be the last. The voices whispered around me. They weren't speaking in words, not in the way we knew them. But I understood. I understood the language of the frost. The mountain was not just feeding on us. It was using us, using our fear, our warmth, our essence to feed its endless hunger. It was eternal. It was ancient. It would never stop. And in the end, it would claim everyone. The faces around me began to fade, one by one, dissolving into the cold, leaving only their hollow eyes behind. But then something else began to form. A shape, a figure, tall, slender, made entirely of frost. It was the same one that had watched us from the distance, the same one that had killed Daver, the same one that had been waiting for us in the storm. But now it was here, in the heart of the ice. It was no longer just a figure. It was the mountain. I could feel it now. It wasn't just a creature, a thing of ice and snow. It was the embodiment of the peaks. It was the heart of the storm, the very soul of the frost. And it had come for me. I tried to move, tried to fight, but there was nothing left. I was frozen. I was part of it. I saw the figure's mask, the frozen face that was both human and inhuman, cracked and jagged, a reflection of the frost's insatiable hunger. It reached toward me with cold, unfeeling hands, and as its touch brushed against me, I felt my soul being pulled away, drawn out of my body like vapor from a frozen lake. And then, in that moment, I understood. The frost wasn't just taking us physically. It was consuming us whole. It wasn't just the body that was claimed. It was everything. The mountain didn't just freeze us. It absorbed us, fed on our fear, our warmth, our very essence. The figure reached out, its fingers grazing my face, and I felt the last of my warmth being drained away. The frost wrapped itself around me like a shroud, pulling me deeper into the heart of the mountain, where the souls of the lost ones awaited. I felt the cold now, not just on my skin, but inside me. It was no longer a sensation. It was a presence. The frost was inside me, devouring me, taking everything that had ever been mine. My body, my soul, my memories, they were all being erased, swallowed up by the mountain's hunger. I could hear the voices again, the lost souls now fading, becoming one with the frost. I could feel their pain, their terror. It was all around me, suffocating, consuming. And then, in the final moments, I heard it. Help me. It was not a voice. It was a cry from deep within the mountain itself. The last cry, the cry of the mountain's hunger. And I realized then the mountain didn't need our warmth. It didn't need our souls. It needed us to remember. It needed us to understand its endless hunger. It needed us to realize that we were all part of it now. It had fed on us. It had become us. We had become it. I was no longer just a victim of the mountain. I was the mountain, and I would never leave.